Teachers and boards of trustees were welcomed onto the Huiturangi Ora Marae in Hamilton for the start of a 4-day study of the draft Maori Pastoral Care Plan. The course was aimed at an examination of Maori spirituality and the history of the people. Participants were led through the Pastoral Care Plan and later developed strategies for implementing it into their programs.
The evening session of the course was given over to an interactive discussion with Ted Douglas, Toby Curtis and Pahenare providing the panel.
Father, I wonder if you could open our evening session as such. Thank you.
Let us pray. Holy Spirit, we ask you to be with us once again tonight, to fill us with that knowledge. And we thank you for the presence that you have obviously brought to this hui, this gathering here today. And we pray that that same Spirit may be with us as we gather here this evening, and that it will remain with us and that we can take it out to others, that we may infect them with that same spirit of liaison, that joy and love, understanding that has come to us today through the speakers. So we thank you for all that we have heard, and we pray that we may continue to grow in that knowledge, grow in understanding, grow as people together. And Lord, we know that your love is there, and that we too can tap into that love if we but open our hearts, ourselves to you. So thank you, Lord, for all that has been and that will be. We trust in you for the future. Lord, thank you, and be with us for a good evening and for a peaceful night. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. I wonder if I could just say this. Ted, we might be starting a little early for him. He said he might be a little late. I think I said tomorrow we probably won't start until about 8 o'clock, and all of a sudden we're starting at 7:15. So he may come in a little later. Ted's speciality in all this is more or less the contemporary development within Maori society. And it was on that strength he was invited to participate with the Commission on Social Policy. And he has done some wonderful things in terms of Maori housing, particularly in areas where they're having difficulty in rehousing Maori people. And he managed to come up with a policy that government accepted and then was implemented by the Maori Affairs Department at the time. However, we're also very lucky to have Pahenare. I don't think he needs an introduction. But sometimes I wonder with his role as such and the kinds of things he becomes involved in and in a sense imposed upon him, and through his generosity he finds himself being not only involved but totally committed, that I sometimes have to remind myself he is not a secular social worker, but he is indeed a priest, and yet he's able to carry out his priestly functions plus all the social obligations that's required by the people. And so we're very lucky to have a person from his background working within Maori communities, not only where he's living, but indeed throughout the country. I mean, it's not everybody that is seen walking with the Dalai Lama next to any way. Well, you know, those sorts of things are are things that no longer surprise us anymore. And that's because of his complete involvement in the Maori community. And also too, even with some fairly prominent Maori people in Maoridom who may have a birthday function. And they're quite often non-Catholics, and Pahenare is invited to attend there and sort of carry out the prayerful functions and all that. And this is another mark, a trademark of his kind of involvement. So we're very lucky to have you, Pahenare. Carry out. And the reason I don't mind carrying on is that he also offers his services free. Well, people, if I could just say, what we wanted to do during the day was for you to sort of talk about what you're exposed to, like the speakers and the various things they came up with, and to have chats in groups amongst yourselves, and to question, and hopefully that someone in the group might be able to share the new light on the things that sort of concern you. As such, and then we're going to have this panel for some of the things you wanted to ask further to satisfy some of the queries you may have had. And then hopefully we would put this day, all today's proceedings to one side, and then get on with the business of looking at the pastoral care plan, particularly in the schools, and how you, as a representative of the school that you come from, or the area of activity that you come from, as to how we might be able in some small way to think about a process of implementation. So this next hour or so, all I can say is that we're throwing it open to you to ask anything at all. We're going to restrict it to just the treaty and the implications of it. But look, if there's anything in Maori society that's bugging you, ask it, and we'll see how we can answer it. The more difficult it is, the more I'll pass it over to Pai. But then again, there would also be some people amongst you who would probably assist us and have a very good time, and would also hopefully get some from you amongst you to respond to the question that I asked by others. So I hope as I look around, I might say, well, look, we know of your involvement in there, would you like to make a comment? So that we're also taking part in it. Is that all right, everybody? Is that right, everybody? You in it? But please, this is the time. If there are things that are annoying you, for example, if such things like, I'm detecting as I read newspapers and whatnot, that one thing is starting to bug people is that we're getting too many Asians in the country. And a lot of them are masking their real concerns by saying, how do Maori people feel about it, you know? And really, they're really asking about their own concerns. Or there are other concerns such as, should these Maori people continue getting handouts? When are they going to stop getting all these handouts? Those sorts of things. Those are the sorts of questions we want to hear asked as well, and then we'll respond. Okay, I think I've said enough. I'll leave it over to you now, and we'll just sit here and wait for the lovely questions.
I think I've heard today mainly to do with what can be done with regard to Maori people, etc. I don't think I put that very well. Anyway, most people here are going back to schools with a large Pākehā population, are going back to boards with which are dominantly Pākehā. What I was wondering was what could be our role, or whose role is it to, as far as dealing with, well, yeah, right, or whatever the appropriate thing is. I'd just like to hear a bit more in that area, if you've got the area.
I started by talking for 6 minutes. It's past turn now to talk for 6 minutes.
You've got to look after number one. So nothing can radiate out unless you are convinced of who you are, the principles you stand for, so that you address your very self And unless unless we all do that, there's no show of rating anything out to affect anybody else. So that, to me, that's the first principle. The second principle was to follow up on the comment of Idi Hapiti. In all we do, we've got to find role players. And in the boards of trustees, you are initiators. An initiator is no good without a supporter. Or if you are an objector, then come up with the option. So have a look at yourself, number one. Two, have a look at role playing. That's just 2 points. My 6 minutes are up.
Thank you, Pa. You happy with that, Ned? If I can be a bit more specific in supporting what he's saying. I believe your question is much more loaded than when it's first viewed, because I see that as a political question. In order to achieve what I believe you want to achieve, you've got to do some persuading. And once you get into the art of persuasion, you're into the art of politics. And therefore, how do you persuade your colleagues on the staff? How do you persuade your board? Are there others that think the same as you? And then you need to get together with them. And then if there are two of you, it's amazing what you can do with the rest of the staff. If there isn't another person who thinks like you, then it's up to you to use your skills to see which of the other staff you're going to sort of develop a relationship with in order for them to see your particular viewpoint. And you start off in a small way.
In our board of trustees for our college anyway, this year coming up, we have no Māori representative. We have 3 Samoans, the rest of our there. Now, what we did, because we knew there was going to be no Māori, we asked to submit a monthly report on Māori, Māori issues, on Māori happenings within the community. But when we went to varsity last year, we were told from the professors there, the loneliest job is a Māori teacher, because you're alone and many times you're on your own. But I agree with that, your board, but I think that if your principal's behind you and tautokos you, whatever she or he does not come out, then I think that's half the battle. That's my personal point of view.
Yeah.
If your principal supports you in their own small way, then that's half your battle and you don't feel so lonely. That's how I feel anyway.
No, that's excellent. And that encourages others to think about it. One of the things with the principal, you've got to, I suppose, I'm just talking from experience, you will need to also nurture the senior staff. Because if a principal doesn't want to support you, and I agree with you, they must support you in order for it to germinate. If they don't support you, or even if they do support you and you're not convinced that they are genuine about it, and some do fall into that slot, they're not genuine about it, then you also have the senior staff to work with.
What about seeking support also from some of the Māori parents in the college community, the school community? And it seems to me that you can be, very concerned within the school, within the college, about the situation, especially if you're on your own and there's only one other teacher. But if you're only talking to each other, then you're not really, I feel, necessarily talking to the right people. And we found that by going out and talking to, because there's a very small Māori population in the school, Whānau Samoans, and the Māori seem to be getting left out. So we asked some of the Māori parents what they'd like to do, and they said that they'd like to consult the rest of the Māori parents. And it launched itself from there. This is only very recently, so things haven't got very far down the track, but it seems to me that that's also, Otherwise, you're talking in isolation about the Māori people instead of talking to them. There's got to be a dialogue as early as possible. Am I being naive about this, or is?
No, that's fine. We were trying to respond to Neville because sometimes you can get the Maori people involved, and then if you haven't done your homework, they become disillusioned because some of the staff are against it, and the principal is not totally convinced, and the board don't want to hear of it. So I think as a teacher, as a member of the board, I think you need to do some spade work in your own situation, and then when you bring the Maori people on board, they're not going to be disillusioned.
We've been talking a lot today about biculturalism, but I'm a little bit confused as to where we're actually heading with it. I mean, what are we trying to achieve in the end? When will we say that we have achieved biculturalism? And are we talking about teaching in schools fluently in both English and Maori, or what exactly is going to be our end result? I mean, I think the idea of biculturalism is great, sharing resources and all the rest of it, but, what is the end result? I'm more confused where we're going to.
I think that if there are 3.4 million people in New Zealand, then there's likely to be 3.4 million definitions or views of what biculturalism is, which means basically it's something that will evolve and change as we get closer to what people feel comfortable with. I think that in the end, though, biculturalism will be defined by the minorities and not by the majority. When they start to feel as if they've achieved something and begin, I suppose, to push less strongly at the edges, to make the world bigger and to encompass more people, I think then we're getting close to what people are happy and satisfied with. And I think that biculturalism must mean bilingualism. You can't define a culture in somebody else's language. You can only look at the world in terms of the communication system that those people use themselves. So for people to write about the nature of Chinese society in English is it's an insight, but in the end it doesn't get into the depths of the Chinese philosophy and the interrelationships between the cultural values of the Chinese and their everyday life and their aims and aspirations for themselves as people. Likewise with Māori or with Pākehā New Zealanders or with anybody else.
Thank you, Ted.
It's lovely playing one off against the other.
When principles and processes are bicultural, then I might be led to believe that society is bicultural. Going back to this other question over here, so often that the Māori is confronted with, I want a representative yesterday. And the bishops are guilty of that. As the Episcopal Vicar for the Māori in Auckland Diocese, they get a call. Can you please appoint a Māori member to Caring Foundation? I said, that's not the way we do it. We'll go back to the community. We want it next week. I said, you get it when it comes. So we went back to the community, and then they run up, haven't you got your nomination? I said, we haven't gone through it yet. Consulting, calling for nominations, and then getting the response from people. So it took much longer. And then we were happy. Then with the eventual nomination to the Caring Foundation. But you see, our process, our principle and a process has to be bicultural as well as sharing of resources. I mean, that stems from principle. But the processes as well, and Leo, as Ted says, all that is part of being bicultural. Again, the process may not be observed because the Māori society goes through whānau and hapu, because they just can't go and get somebody and say, nominate that one on. But they've got to go through that process of consultation first, because the mana is within the community, not with just an individual.
Perhaps what should have also been asked, why have we got biculturalism? Because from about 1847 onwards, the policy in this country was to have assimilation. And all Maoris were to sort of become, hopefully, brown-skinned Pākehā, or if not, fair-skinned people as such, through intermarriage and so on. So for about 100 and so many years, over 100 years, the policy was assimilation didn't work. And in 1960 out came the policy, after the Hun Report, the policy of integration. And the idea was for Maoris and Pākehā to share the best of both cultures, so that we will have a silver fern New Zealander coming through as the product. That didn't work because it seemed that only Maori people were prepared to take this seriously. And so that failed because it became seen after a period of time that integration was almost a mask for assimilation, where we had to surrender ourselves culture-wise and everything else to becoming something that we're not. Then it moves from there to a loose state of bicultural thinking in the 70s, in the early 70s. And just when people thought they might be moving into a bicultural mode, along came this animal called multiculturalism. And everybody started to sort of get into this idea of multiculturalism. And again, the same thing happened. What was happening is that people of every other culture was trying to adjust and adapt to it, except the Pākehā culture, the dominant culture. They felt they didn't have to change. Everyone had to adapt. That was the measuring rod. And then, of course, I think Maori people started to see that if this multicultural thing started to continue the way they were, they may have missed out on more than they should have had, because there was a strong move amongst the decision makers and policy makers to take more account of Pacific Island needs rather than Maori needs. And I think Maori people became a little concerned, and knowing quite well that anything that was good for Maoris was going to be good for the country. But the moment they get some Maori concession, then it always followed that Pacific Island people were given a similar recognition. For example, when Maori people pushed to have people who were well qualified in terms of Maori culture to go to teachers' college and be trained, and that was seen as a qualification entry to becoming trained for a teacher. Almost the next year, Pacific Island people with similar qualities were also given the opportunity to train as teachers, and this sort of goes on and on. And it wasn't really until, and Ted can probably comment on this, it probably wasn't until the question of language became a source of real contention of the two languages and going before Parliament to have Maori become an official, that biculturalism started to take on a much firmer role. And also at that time, you had the Mana Motuhake movement with Matarata. That was seen as something that should never have happened in this country. How dare natives try and become politicians, all those sorts of things. So it all helped. Maori people were starting to get the limelight in terms of development through those things. Ngāta Matoa, people like Donna Awatere were starting to talk about sovereignty, and she even wrote a book about it, and what Pākehā people should do, and it wasn't what Pākehā people wanted to see or read about. Then you had Tatarita Pōnanga saying that all Pākehās are jitsam and flotsam, they must leave the country. So all those things were going on. And then people started to look, well, perhaps we aren't doing what we should be doing. And so biculturalism started to come in. And then came the Treaty of Waitangi. Now, I can recall back in 1980, when that was the platform of the Mana Motuhake Party, everyone laughed at it. What a silly lot this is, talking about the treaty and making it a platform of an election. And everybody just laughed, and I think Maoris laughed about it. But it wasn't until Pākehā, it wasn't until they moved from the Treaty of Waitangi to people saying that as under the Treaty of Waitangi, Maori people had special rights because they were the indigenous people. So everyone got on the bandwagon as Maori people, as indigenous, had special rights, and therefore they should have this, and have that. And I can recall going to a conference in Hastings. It was actually at St. Joseph's, and most of them were clerics that attended this conference. And I was talking about the indigenous people had certain rights. And lo and behold, in this workshop, and then nearly all Pākehā people, and mainly nuns, and priests, and brothers, and they told me that they were indigenous too, to this country. And it came back to what we've been listening to all today, that if you own the language, you can define its meaning. Mm-hmm. And they were defining indigenous in their terms. And I was defining it another way. And by 1984-85, a real change came, because a lot of Maoris believed that as Maori people, as indigenous people, we did have certain rights under the treaty. And so it switched, and I know a number of us wrote papers on it. And I challenged, I think it was Haka, I think it was down thing, he spoke about the ethnicity of people. And I wrote a paper sort of refuting that and saying, no, it's not our ethnicity, it's the fact that we are tangata whenua. Change from indigenous to the word tangata whenua. And because it is our word, it is our language, no Pākehā tried to redefine it. And then it didn't take long before Pākehā people were telling me that they were also tangata whenua. And it didn't take long for us to say, okay, if you're tangata whenua, please tell us your tribe, and then we'll tell your chiefs of your tribe that they have a newfound member. And it wasn't until that tangata whenua thing, and it was someone like Whatu Winiata, who wrote an article, and I think all his academic colleagues down at Victoria University were starting to get at him, because people were saying tangata whenua had special rights, and therefore if they're not tangata whenua, they haven't got special rights. And this seemed to affect a lot of non-Maori people. And so Whatu, in his wisdom, wrote an article to satisfy his critics at Victoria University. And this was picked up by the Dominion, I think it was, and it was picked up all the major newspapers, and it became another topic of heated discussion. Because he said in there that as tangata whenua, Maori people know how to behave. And it comes through in a very sharp fashion when Maori people have to behave in certain ways as tangata whenua when they have manuhiri. And so he started talking about the fact that the manuhiri is a visitor and the Maori people are tangata whenua. And he said, all Maori people are tangata whenua. And all others who are not tangata whenua are really manuhiri and therefore are visitors. But this was the line that seemed to annoy everybody. However, in Maori society, as good manuhiri or good visitors, they all know when it's time to leave. And it was from there, I think, that biculturalism started to become something that we must all do something about. Does that help?
I'd like to give you another example from this week. Anybody here from Auckland? Okay. Have you heard the controversy about My FM? It's a radio station in Auckland which has a warrant which was granted to Ngāti Whātua o Orake. And they've been granted the FM spectrum, which was fought for through the tribunal and in the High Court, and was finally agreed to. And they went on air a week or so ago, and immediately, or in fact before they went on air, when they announced what the format of their programming was going to be, there were complaints from other FM stations in Auckland that My FM was not a Māori station. The terms of the warrant that was granted by Irirangi Te Motu was that they were to promote Māori language and culture. And the other stations are saying what Māori kids listen to is not Māori culture. Who is it? Is it for them to determine what Māori culture is? We must accept that Māori culture is not something that died in 1840 or is to be resurrected in pre-1840, pre-treaty terms. But Māori culture is what Māori people do and think and believe in 1840, 1940, and the year 2040. Culture changes, everybody's culture changes. And my FM is likely to go off the air because somebody else is defining what Māori culture is, because they believe that it has a economic advantage.
Yeah, I haven't got any statistics to prove this, but it seems to me that the proportion of the tangata Pacific or Pacific tangata in Catholic schools is far greater than the proportion of Māori in Catholic schools. Now, that should raise the odd question.
I think you're raising a damn good point there. You see, the Pacific Island dimension was starting to make inroads ahead of Māori in terms of multiculturalism across the board, and that Māori people started to respond fairly actively. Now, that situation, I'm just speaking as someone from the outside. When I see Pacific Island people coming into Catholic schools and taking over, Māori people don't seem to be unduly concerned. It's making quite a statement about Māori people and their relationship to the Catholic Church. Yes, well, it's a strong statement.
This is one of the things
And I think one of the reasons they're not doing anything about it is because Catholic schools have never tried to involve them to do something about it in the first place. I just say that from the outside.
I think there's also a demographic component.
Something else I'm not sure of, you know, I just wonder.
It's not, I think it's easy to oversimplify, I'm sure, in that one.
In Auckland, the Department of Statistics announced in the paper last week that there were more Pacific Islanders in Auckland than there are Māori. Now, I think that they announced that almost as an attempt, so here's a kick in the guts for the Māoris, we'll tell them this and see whether they'll calm down a bit. But of course, Pacific Islanders are not they're a very desperate group. Or disparate group. This is one of the original descendants of Mrs. Malaprop. They're very diverse. There are 5 or 6 different language groups in the Pacific Island community. There may be as many as 70% of them may be Samoans in Auckland. But the statistics were published rather peculiarly in the Herald, because they said there are 107,000 Pacific Islanders in Auckland, and there were only 84,000 Māoris. But if you counted part Māoris, then there were more. But Pacific Islanders are not divided into 2 groups. You're either Pacific Islander or you're not. So, I mean, the statistics it was creative lying. Some people have said that there are 3 sorts of lies. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And statistics are an amazing way of fudging the truth.
I just think that also points up our cultural chauvinism too, that we're quite happy to say Pacific Island people and just ignore the fact that they're, as you say, quite distinct and you know, and strongly identifying within their own particular culture, you know. But I've got another comment to make and just an observation. I suppose as one who's travelled somewhat stumblingly, but nevertheless with some perseverance down this bicultural road for, you know, a reasonable number of years now, that, you know, I think there is a point as a Pākehā, and just to get back to that question of how do we come back, or what do we take back to our people, I think there are 2 main issues. One is that as a Pākehā, it's really important to me to share from my kete with these insights with my Pākehā, you know, peers and fellow school community people. But in the context of doing like that, whether it's in you know, helping perhaps teach a little Māori hymn or something quite basic like that, and yet I might ask or invite the Māori students to do that, you know, on the grounds that I'm sure they can do it better than I can. But one is in the position that you, as a teacher with a mixed clientele, that one is seen by the Māori, I'm sure, as a Pākehā standing up there telling us what to do. Although my philosophy may be that I really must help educate Pākehās as far as I'm able in my sort of humble way and holding way, you know, to be less monocultural. But while you're doing that, you're in a position of power over the Māori students as well, and I think that's quite a dilemma for Pākehā.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we can get back to Nev's one, you know, and I haven't looked at it fairly closely in the last 3 or 4 years, but if I looked at Catholic education and they're keen on doing things Māori, and if you talk to many Māori people who used to go to Catholic school and you ask them where they send their kids now, they all send them down the road to a local school, and they don't even send them to the boarding school they once went to. I think there's still a view that the Catholic school system is not getting it right for Māoris. But they are seeing the attempts being done in the state schools as trying to get it right, even though they still have the problems. They are seeing the efforts being made in state schools getting it right. But somehow or other, it's not sort of coming through with, and I think a lot of it has got to do with I'm not sure whether doctrine is the word, but with the Catholic philosophy. There is still the view that the Catholic philosophy is better than the Maori culture. And if you heard the bishop last night, was saying that the Maori thing has got to be as equally valuable as that of the Catholic nature of our life. But I think for many Maori, and the way many of our Catholic schools tend to portray their position, is that the Maori thing is still subject to the Catholic value. I don't know, I'm just speaking off the top of my head.
That's just made me think then, is perhaps the Catholic school role rather more important for bringing Pākehā people along to helping them towards a bicultural awareness rather than rather than anything else. Because perhaps that's more
yes. That could be one way, yes.
Going back to his question about more Samoans in the Catholic schools, he's dead right. There are more Samoans in the schools than Māori. From our area, there's very little Māori in the schools. But I don't think that there's many points on that subject, because even we've had to face that there's 60% Samoans in our schools and there's 13% Māori. Now, what I look at with the kids is that if you don't give them something exciting to work towards, then why are we asking them to come to our Catholic school? And the other thing that I see coming through, and this is what really brought me up here for this weekend, was Māori theology in the curriculum. Yeah. And to me, that was coming into my religion class and the pastoral care plan. That's something for the kids to look at and say, hey, this is for me. And at the moment, there's nothing out there for our kids. There's nothing. If the kid doesn't come through kapahaka, then the other kids say, you're not in the Māori world. But what right has anyone got to judge how a child walks into their Māori world? There's many doorways. As one of my kids said, I come through religion door, miss. Can I come into my Māori world? Kei te pai. Can I come through Whaikorero? Kei te pai. That child has a choice to come through any doorway. But when you come through a doorway and they say, sorry, you can't have it, you can't have Māori here because there's barriers, then why should they come to our Catholic school? This is what I look at my family's experience coming through 56 years of COVID. And you weren't even allowed to talk a Māori word in the school unless you went to the colleges. So this is what excites me, and this is what excites the kids, the pastoral care plan. Because that's not only coming into the curriculum and to Māori language, it's coming into religion class. And I think that should have been in ages ago. That's my point of view.
Well, it wouldn't have been introduced voluntarily by Pākehā. It had to be introduced because Māoris pushed the barriers, pushed against the barriers and said, this school system's not working, this view of the world that is not our view of the world. The changes that have occurred in the Catholic school system can be directly related to the examples that have been set by Māori Catholics.
I think our co-masters of past, they have passed on, have a big role to play too, because they never ever stop talking to us young ones. They always implemented it. And especially our old Māori mission priest. I'm talking about Father Cleary, Father Wall. They help build us. So it's our turn to determine it and carry on what they've and put it into us and make sure it comes into reality. I think that to me plays a big part.
The Archdiocese must have been a bit different from the Auckland Diocese.
Pardon?
The Archdiocese must have been a bit different from the Auckland Diocese.
Oh, we get strong people. Yeah.
Could I just ask, how many of you, coming from different schools, have got the Treaty of Waitangi in your charter? You've all got it.
It's no longer compulsory. After the Broadwood decision, it's no longer compulsory.
We don't know that at home until I get there.
Back to Broadwood.
My next question, how has that dimension in the charter of the treaty impacted upon you as a teacher in the school? What have you been told by your board of trustees or by the principal as to how you're to respond to it? Have you ever received any guidance or direction regarding that particular clause in the charter? For example, would you like to talk about it?
Yes, well, we had our policy is firmly in place, and we had a focus of our HOD committee and then through departments as to just how we would incorporate the treaty objectives that we agreed on, or at least that our community agreed on, into the classroom. Now, that's the ideal. In reality, some have taken it on board. Numerous departments have, but numerous departments haven't too. And it's been very hard to ensure that everyone is honest with it. But then I see a lot of people are coming from the same insecurities, the insecurities that we're hearing about with the Catholic character of the schools. That's something which has surfaced recently. There were, well, I mean, recently I'm talking about the last couple of decades, we haven't really had insecurity about Catholic character in colleges until recently. And now that that is under threat, it almost comes into competition with the Treaty of Waitangi objectives. Because people are saying, well, hey, you know, what's more important to hold on to? And numerous schools are going through that whole experience as to just where do we put our priorities, when really, as someone just pointed out, the pastoral care plan seems to be the point of convergence. And maybe that's where we can get both together. But in our school, that's what we've done. We have tried, and numerous departments have taken it on board.
Yes, perhaps we can share what we do in our school. The treaty is part of our charter. We have a bicultural commission, and we meet regularly, and our task is to consider bicultural issues and try and do something within the school. We have 3% of our roll are Māori, and we have a large proportion of our roll are Pacific Island, about 5%. We have, for example, Maori Language Week coming up. We have a Maori woman artist who is coming to school. What is her name?
Lisa Reham.
Yes, she's at the university at the moment. We have a Maori young liaison Maori woman who's at Lincoln University, and she is going to give a keynote address to our girls' assembly. The girls are often use the Maori sign of the cross, and we sing Maori hymns. We, as a professional development for the staff, are going to the College of Education to meet with Belle Irwin, who is the one on the staff of the Maori unit there, and he's going to give us ideas on how to incorporate things Maori into school. We feel that it's very low key, but we made special efforts in 1990 to educate all of our girls at each level about the treaty.
Staff.
And the staff as well, and we've taken part as a staff in Project Waitangi, which was an effort for us to make contact with our own culture so that we could then see or feel what it's like to have a culture and perhaps understand a little bit more of the bicultural issues. But I think we often feel as members of the Bicultural Committee that as Pākehā people we're trying very hard, and we often don't know which way to go. To come to Hui like this is really it's really important for us.
Māori students is supported by the Catholic character strongly, and it is supported by the whole Catholic character ethos of the people who buy into that in our school. But I don't know much about any other schools, but we have a larger number of Catholic teachers on our staff than we've had for a long time, but it still wouldn't be hard. And as a person who heads the bicultural committee at our school, my biggest headache is with well-meaning non-Catholic teachers who will say, oh, don't those girls sing beautifully, they make me cry.
Discussion ranged over many areas not recorded here. Observers will wish to extend into their own discussion after viewing the rest of the tapes.